Mchangizi here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to talk about how to test evolutionary design hypotheses. There's a frequent thought in the biological and brain sciences that you can't test evolutionary hypotheses about function. Those are just so stories. People are so used to studying mechanisms in the lab with big machines that go ping or chemicals that they can't imagine that there's ways of testing things that aren't like that. But of course you can test evolutionary hypotheses about design and function. And there's three broad categories about how you might go do that. And they're morphology, behavior, and phylogeny. So morphology just refers to the design. So for example, let's just take countershading amongst fish as just one example that I've never had any research related to. Countershading refers to fish are sometimes lighter on the bottoms of them than on the tops. And so if they're near the surface and you're a fish underneath, because it's light up there out in the world, up beyond the water, you can't see those fish as well because they're lighter on the bottom. So that's a hypothesis. They're lighter on the bottom so that, in order that, they can evade predation. So how do you go test a functional hypothesis like that? Well, on the morphology side, it's really asking about the design or the structure. In this case, it's about the actual colors being lighter on the bottom relative to the top. And so when you work out that as an engineer and you actually ask, does this theoretically make sense as an engineering? Does it actually work out that kind of morphology works? And that's the first question that you have to ask. What is the optimal design, the other color differences that give you that? And so that's what you'll do if it's mental. It might be a brain algorithm. It's not necessarily always a morphological thing in the physical sense. It can be just the shape and structure of the thing. Is it, in fact, have the peculiar design that you would predict if you were an engineer? Well, the second kind of prediction that you can make is behavioral. And that's a broad class of things. Just, for example, in this case, the question is, do they get eaten less? Do the animals that are lighter on the bottom get eaten less than those that are not? So you can actually just do experiments and you could paint some the opposite of what they should be. Do they get predated upon more often? That's testable as well. And the third is this category of phylogeny. And that's the question of, well, do the animals that typically find themselves at the surface, do they tend to have countershading more often than animals that are elsewhere in other kinds of habitats? And that's a phylogenetic question or evolutionary tree kinds of questions. You can just compare different kinds of animals and ask whether they have the right kind of design for the right kind of place. These are all testable classes or ways of testing, different categories of testing evolutionary functional hypotheses. And they're very different from what a typical mechanistic-oriented scientist would do, but they're part of and parcel of how you test these hypotheses so that they're not just so stories.